Hello, America. Dave Hodges here, host of the Common Sense Show. We are the show that is freeing America one enslaved mind at a time. Thank you so much for joining us. Really good to be with you. You know, we defend God, family, country, and I think in this series we're going to do today, we are doing a little bit of both. And I think that we are really up against it. I'm going to say this before we start. I supported Donald Trump through three elections. Do I think he was a perfect guy? No. Do I think he was a perfect candidate? No. I thought he was the best available. And I liked a lot of the things he did. And I don't like what happened in 2020. And I'm glad to see groups like Judicial Watch not letting go of election integrity, which is why I give to them. By the way, I'm not an advertiser for Judicial Watch, but we contribute to them. And I think that all people should contribute a small amount. You can go to judicialwatch.org and they have a donate button. I would recommend doing it. It's tax deductible as well. So I'm telling you, you really want to support groups like this because I worry about election integrity. And the fact that some groups drag their feet on something as simple as voter ID, excuse me, to pick up a UPS package or a registered letter, I got to show an ID, show a police officer an ID. It's ridiculous, ridiculous that people are using this Jim Crow argument. And in all 50 states, if you're poor, you can get a free state issued ID. Okay, but anyway, I digress. But I want to say this. I have supported Donald Trump through thick and thin. We're going to talk about some allegations that he is preparing to become a dictator. But this runs so contrary. No tax on tips. He killed the TPP, which would have taken significant power away from our government. He has preserved the republic in many ways. Now he's engaged in behaviors that are damaging the republic. And we're going to get into that here. And we're going to look at how dictators come to power. And if Donald Trump was to follow the pattern, what avenues are available to him? And I've come up with five. Now, I don't necessarily believe he's going to become a dictator, but with the heavy influence of people like Yarvinistic Peter Thiel, Sam Altman, who make statements like freedom and democracy are incompatible, then we should all be worried because these people dominate his administration. And then the other people that dominate his administration, like Susie Wiles, are Israel first, America second, and we're involved in a very self-destructive war with the same old worn out argument, weapons of mass destruction. Where's the proof? Israel has been telling us for 25, 30 years, Iran's on the verge of a nuclear weapon. About every month we hear that nonsense, and it never comes to fruition. And now we're talking about they moved their nuclear stuff way, way underground. I thought the bombing took care of that in June of 2025. Okay, listen, I come from an old family line where I could smell bad stuff from a mile away, and I'm smelling it from thousands of miles away. Not believing it. So we're going to get into all that right here. Um, how to recognize when a dictator has the option to come into fruition, and how a republic form of democracy goes by the wayside. We're brought to you by My Patriot Supply. And in these troubled times, one of the things that the Bible does tell us is you better prepare. You better prep for what's coming. And I have advertised on and off for My Patriot Supply for a long time, but there's a lot of things they do I really, really like. You get 2,000 calories per day. Okay. You have a variety of meals so you don't habituate, you get bored with them. Research shows you actually habituate to the food and stop eating it, even if that means starving to death. So you need variety, and they have that. It comes in durable, portable packaging that survives floods, rodents, and time. 25-year shelf life. Quick and easy to cook. Just add water and heat. And you can do outside get a fire started. You could do a number of things. We have a sun oven, by the way. I recommend people get that. Store compactly, discreetly in buckets or totes. I think you better hide your food supply if society really breaks down. And it actually tastes good. I can tell you that right now. And some people wrote to me when I advertised for them before, oh, they're bad because of the. They don't use preservatives. Please spare me the notes that say that. They don't. There's no GMOs or none of that nonsense. So, how do you get yours? Go to preparewithdave.com. That's preparewithdave.com. And given these uncertain times are on and how quickly this war could erupt into a global conflict, I think we all ought to be prepared. And I think you need to take preparation seriously. Now, you can only do what you can do. You can only do what the good Lord has provided you with resources, but you need to do something. And I'm warning you, I think really tough times are potentially in our future, and I pray they're not going to happen. We'll get into that a little later. So let's get down to the matter of facts here, okay? Affordability is going to cause Donald Trump to not get the midterm results he needs. Oh, yes, his candidates swept the primaries. Doesn't mean they're going to win the general election because you're talking about an election and a primary between fairly like-minded people. Not the case when you're going against the Democrats, who refer to them even now as they refer to themselves as democratic socialists, i.e., communists. So we have hyper-capitalist, tech bro influence. You have the other extreme of extreme communism. Yeah, this is really clear. And I'll tell you what communism appeals to. And before I tell you, let me just say this. 1 out of 3 people surveyed in this country say that they would consider voting for a socialist candidate. Let me say something to those people, okay? I'm sorry you didn't read your history book or retain the lessons good teachers gave you because socialism slash communism, really it ends one way. Total power, no freedom, and a lot of body bags. That's how it ends. It's never worked. No society that's ever embraced that economic philosophy has ever survived. The Soviet Union might have been the longest standing one, and would they last about 70 years? And the people hated it. They plotted ways to defect. Look at Cuba. How many times did Cuban baseball teams come to play in America and they stopped because the baseball players tried to defect? People don't want to live in those systems, and neither do you. But here's why it appeals to people. This ideology appeals to people because we're going to take from the really rich who are giving you jobs, and we're going to take from them and give to you. Well, that never really happens. What could happen is some of the rich lose their money to the rich that support the communist movement. But you still have cronyism, you still have dictatorship, and now you have no civil liberties. You forfeited by moving into their system. Look at New York City. Mondami just took over 9,000 properties. Why? Well, we don't think they maintained or serviced their residents very well, so we just stole it. And that's what they did. They stole it. Where's the constitutional uproar? I'm waiting for the Supreme Court case on this one because that's a clear Fifth Amendment violation. But if you're in socialism, you have no Fifth Amendment protections with property rights. None. They're hard enough in our society today. I know. I'm a victim of an attempted land grab going back and starting back in 2004, going to 2012, involving myself and 300 of my neighbors. And they just wanted to steal our land and not give us anything for it. And that's actually what put me behind a microphone. So I know all too well how this can work. And this was inside of a constitutional republic. You go socialism, they want it, they take it, you have no rights. Shut up, sit down, or we'll deal with you. Okay, now, Trump appears to not care about affordability any longer. He campaigned on it. The war is destroying the economy. Oh, we championed the slight drop in the interest rates, the depression, oh, excuse me, the inflation. Don't want to get ahead of myself. 1 month. Now we're back at war. And even when the economic numbers improved, Trump's popularity improved this much. And this is going to carry over to the midterm. Here's what can happen. If Trump loses the House only, his agenda is gone. And really, the way he's going with the tech bros and the data centers, part of me would say that might be a good thing. But overall, Trump's populism is a lot better than what we've had overall, minus things like data centers and the military industrial complex and the war. I don't want what the other side's going to give us. Okay, but the Democrats in the House will tie everything up. Oh, and they'll have impeachment proceedings. And even if Trump doesn't lose the Senate, with the GOP becoming the minority party, you got people like Thune and Murkowski and Susan Collins. They're rhinos on steroids. They may as well put a D in front of them because they're functionally operative Democrats. They might vote to impeach. But Trump doesn't seem to care about what they think. I'll give you an example. House bill on affordability preventing large corporate investors from buying private homes, and they're buying them up and they're driving the price up for everybody else. I just got one of those requests here just a couple of weeks ago. I thought that period was fading, but it's not. And we're becoming a nation that's building rental homes, and that pace is catching up to building single family homes. Oh, what's that old saying from the World Economic Forum? You'll own nothing and love it. Okay, well, I think this is a reflection of that philosophy. And who are the people buying up the homes? Well, it's the interlock between the banks, the tech bros, the military industrial complex, and their funding sources, private equity, BlackRock, Blackstone, Vanguard, State Street. That's who's doing it. And what was it? Gosh, 10 years ago, 8 years ago, you could get single family starter home for $65,000 of annual income, but that's what you had. Today it takes over 120. That's the result of what's happened here. They are eliminating home ownership, turning everybody into renters. And you know what's interesting is with the younger generation now, they don't really seem interested in owning homes. And that's what the data tells us too. The polling tells us this too. I don't know if they've given up because it seems to be out of their reach. And I'm sure that's part of it. I don't know if the education system's had anything to do with shaping that attitude. I'm not sure about that either. But here's what I do see. Trump has not focused on affordability. Let me give you an example. House bill on the housing that passed 85 to 5, section 1001, preventing corporate investors from buying single family homes. Bingo, that's awesome. That's awesome. That one thing alone would stop the great appreciation we're seeing in the housing market. Trump refused to sign it. It did become law after 10 days, and he didn't sign it. Wow. That's pretty amazing, isn't it? A president that ran on affordability wouldn't sign a bill that would have stopped the dramatic increase in housing. He's not worried about it. And he doesn't seem to be worried about his ratings. This is what's led a lot of people out there to say he is going to become a dictator. I pray that's not true, and I'm not making that allegation myself, but I am a student of history because I used to teach history. I used to teach advanced placement history. See, people know me primarily psychology, stat research. Just saw a young lady not young, she's now middle-aged, but I had her in class. Says a lot about my age, doesn't it? And had her in psychology class, and that's what I'm known for. But a lot of people don't know that early in my career, I was really history focused. And I learned a lot about how these takeovers happen. I learned a lot too about how government responds to disasters. I took a course in it, one of the most unique courses at the time when I was a junior at a university. It was an amazing course. And it was an interim course. It was the 4 week interim between fall semester and winter semester. And I had to stay on campus anyway because I played basketball. But I was able to take a class. I think I took two classes to try to get ahead. And a lot of times during the playing season, I only took 12 hours instead of 15 just because the load was so heavy and we were traveling so much. So I took these intersession classes, and one of them was on emergency management, and I learned a ton. And it tied in with what I learned about how dictators come to power. So let me go through a couple things here. First of all, I'm just going to go through how four leaders became dictators. Some of them temporary, some of them up until the time of their death. Let's start with the probably the most extreme example, which would be Adolf Hitler. A lot of people don't realize this. We think of the German period of the 1920s and 30s and 40s. They committed the Holocaust, which they did do, and forget the Holocaust deniers, that happened. How do I know? Because I got German refugees that were my ancestors, and my grandmother's maiden name was Freiberg. I've heard all about it from the family folklore. That did happen. I just laugh at people that tried to deny this. And the Jewish people are still outraged today and stand on the belief that we're never going to let this happen again. I totally agree with that philosophy. But Germany, prior to that time, was the most advanced scientifically. They should have developed the bomb first, but it was because of Heisenberg they did, and I've told that story already. They were cultured in the arts. They led the world in arts and science, in math advances, technological advances. They had the Reichstag. They had representative government, and it worked quite well until Hitler got himself elected. Now, he tried to lead a revolution, got thrown in jail, wrote Mein Kampf, which, by the way, is the most read book in the Middle East. Did you know that? The Muslim Brotherhood, that's what they distribute to everybody is Mein Kampf. That, by the way, the Nazis created the Muslim Brotherhood. That's another story another time. I've actually done a show on that in the past with Paul Preston. But Hitler manages to get into the Reichstag. And the same people that were, Germany had the post-World War I collapse economically, right? And you've all seen in history books the woman with the scarf with a wheelbarrow full of German marks going into a grocery store, and she could only buy a loaf of bread with this wheelbarrow full of money. But one thing I know about the German businesses at the time, they'd close at lunch to raise their prices. Then they'd close the doors to close for the day, and they'd raise their prices again. They come in the morning, have to raise them before they open. They were doing three price raises a day because the inflation was out of control. Well, this led to economic desperation, and this is why people today in America, because 65% of America can't afford a $500 car repair bill, and we know poverty is growing, homelessness is growing, and so people are looking for help. And they'll take it wherever they can get it. Socialism promises the world and delivers misery. Well, they're listening to the promise of a Mondami. That's how he gets elected. And then they're going to find out how misled they are as they suffer more greatly than they did before people like Mondami come into power. But see, this is what popularizes these fascists and socialists. Hitler capitalized on people's misery. It's the government's fault. It's the bankers' fault. It's the Jews' fault. And this is the mantra he used to get himself elected. We're going to take money from these people and give it to these people. Does that sound familiar? The billionaire taxes we're hearing about? Well, you pass a billionaire tax. First of all, they're going to leave your state, so you're going to have fewer jobs. Secondly, that money does create more jobs, so you're going to lose jobs on that avenue as well. And they're going to pass the cost on to the customer, so it's inflationary. It doesn't work. But Hitler came in singing this song, and eventually he was frustrated because he couldn't gain a numerical advantage to control government. And so what he did was we burn it down and we take over as a dictator in an emergency situation. False flag to dictatorship. And that's how it happened in Germany. Okay, well, what about Rome and Julius Caesar? Well, a lot of people don't know this unless they studied world history or remember it. Rome was a republic, and the family was at the center of everything. Don't mess with a man's family. Okay? We used to be that way in America, not any longer. So Rome is sailing along, and Julius Caesar wanted power. Well, they had an external military threat, and he got his friends appointed into the Senate, and they made him the dictator. And that continued until they turned on him, killed him. But Rome went from a republic to a dictatorship based on an external military threat. FDR was a temporary dictator, and that's not all bad. I give him credit because we were in about the same place financially as the Germans, and we didn't go down the Nazi route. And I believe FDR saved us from that. Now, he did some things that I find questionable. That idea of packing the court we hear Democrats talking about today, that was FDR's idea. That's where this started. And by the way, the original technocrats were in his administration. The tech bros today and their anti-democracy attitudes, and we should rule everything because we have all the technology. That movement started in 1932 in the Roosevelt administration. He appointed a lot of them. He didn't let them totally have their way, though. And we were facing serious threat from Germany. We were facing a secondary threat from Japan. I told you before how we kind of manufactured Pearl Harbor, forced the Japanese into it with the 8-point plan. Not going to go through that again, but FDR seized basically dictatorial control over the economy. He seized control over society as a whole, and it all became one people for one purpose. Now, look at, we won a two-front war. That's amazing. We couldn't win in Vietnam, but under FDR and then Truman, we won a two-front war. That's absolutely incredible. I don't know of any nation that's ever won a two-front war. That's what lost Germany World War II when they opened up the Russian front. It really, take your hat off to FDR for that. Okay. But he did introduce wage and price controls, make work projects, and the rich got richer off of that. He eliminated gold, says he must turn in all your gold, and then he raised the price after he got all the gold. And he did make work projects for his friends running the Work Progress Administration, the Civilian Conservation Corps. Now, I'm not arguing they didn't do good. You put men to work, give them some money they can send home to their families, they're not revolting. That was a good thing that he did. But we got socialist introduced to America in a big way for the first time. And the super elite in this country, the Rockefellers, the Westinghouses, so forth, they benefited from this. Okay. But FDR was a dictator. Now, Truman didn't really continue that. He finished World War II. He limited Korean War exposure because he didn't trust the military industrial complex. And boy, Dwight Eisenhower had a lot to say about that, didn't he, in his farewell speech? So Truman really moved away from all the controls. Now, one thing he did continue, and it continued under Eisenhower, was driving up inflation to pay down the debt. The GDP to debt ratio was 121% in 1946. And so Truman said, oh, well, we got to inflate the economy. So we'll just produce more. It'll benefit people in the long run. But here are wages. Here's inflation. People are losing. Here's Social Security, fixed incomes. Here's inflation. Here's fixed income. And then your bonds and treasury you're investing in, they're below the inflation rate. And that basically brought down the debt, and it took 10 years. This is what we're doing right now today. And I've gone through and I've painstakingly said this 3 times in the last 3 months. And I've shown you Janet Yellen to Kevin Bissett to the current Fed chair. They've all said the same thing. And meanwhile, Trump gets up and he's telling lies about how good the inflation rate is. It's not good because it's still outpacing income. It's outpacing a lot of investments. And they're trying to make the actual worth of the debt go lower by having the dollar worth less. So 40 trillion being 40 trillion, well, the 40 trillion might become 30 trillion with this strategy. And Truman did that. Okay. But he ended the FDR dictatorship. President Lincoln, we're in a civil war. And there were European interests helping the South. And this is one thing people don't know, how South almost won the war. And this is Robert E. Lee's fault. He won the first Battle of Bull Run. He won the second Battle of Bull Run. And Washington, D.C. was open. The town was vacant. Sugar was selling for $20 a sack when it was going for a nickel prior to that. I mean, the people were in panic, knowing they're going to get invaded. The government's going to be in big trouble. Washington's going to be organized, and they'll probably sue for peace, and you'll have two Americas. It came that close to happening. But Lee failed to follow up on his initial victory. And then he really blew it with Pickett's charge in the Battle of Gettysburg. If the North had lost the Battle of Gettysburg, probably would have had the same result. So when you take a look at Lincoln, he had a real difficult time of holding the country together. He needed a draft. The Southerners were volunteering. They thought they were fighting for their economic survival, preserving slavery. The exports, imports, and tariffs were not in their favor. And that was really the biggest thing. That was above the slavery issue. And that's not what people really realize. Slavery was number two. The economy was number one. Isn't that how people always vote anyway? Social issue is second. The economic issue is first. And that's what was driving people to volunteer from the farms in the South to fight. And the volunteers in the South were going to outnumber the volunteers in the North. So Trump went to a draft. Excuse me, Lincoln went to a draft. Freudian slip there because Trump's going to a draft too. Another story, another time. And there were draft riots, and there were people that wrote articles against the president, and he threw them in jail. Totally violated their First Amendment, but it was under martial law. He was a dictator up until the time of his death. Now, the one tragic thing about the death of Lincoln, I don't believe would have had Reconstruction punished the South and sent it economically into the Stone Age. And that happened under his successor and Congress. They wanted to punish the South rather than bring the South back in. Remember Lincoln saying, malice towards none, charity towards all? We would have had a reasonable Reconstruction period with Lincoln had he lived. Unfortunately, he didn't live, and it really hurt the South tremendously. I remember Atlanta was burned down. You had Sherman's March to the Sea. The South was in devastation. But going back to Lincoln's wartime behavior, he was a dictator. Now, that will end when Andrew Johnson comes into office and the Civil War is over. We've had our run of dictators, but it's been temporary. Does Donald Trump fit that model? I think the answer is he has the potential. He doesn't seem concerned about the polls. He doesn't, I mean, you look at that Housing Act, 85-5 in the Senate. Are you kidding me? The majority of his party, vast majority, voted for it, and he just let it sit there and become law. He wouldn't sign it. And that had been a signal to the people, I'm on your side. We're not going to let these corporations and private equity investors drive the price of housing up. That was a tremendous bill. The one I really was for, and I'm thinking, Mr. President, what are you doing? But he's not concerned about Congress. Why not? Is he that arrogant that he doesn't think that the GOP is in jeopardy in the midterms? Or does he know something that we don't? And that's what we're going to talk about in the next segment. We'll be back and listen, it's going to get exciting. Do I think Donald Trump's going to do these things? I pray he's not. But we're going to lay it on the table because I think preparation involves foreknowledge and you need to know the possibilities. I'm Dave Hodges. This is the Common Sense Show. We'll see you back here again next time.